Hello and welcome to Coffee and Control, the podcast where I find fascinating people from within the world of control and convince them to answer all of my questions. I'm your host, Lucy Hodgins, and today's episode is a little bit unusual because I'm not just talking to one interesting person. Oh no, I have just come back from the European Control Conference in Thessaloniki in Greece. So I went along and brought my microphones with me and essentially just tried to interview anyone who would talk to me. So my aim with this episode is to kind of recreate the feel of ECC and also highlight some of the talks that I attended that I particularly enjoyed. Just a caveat that ECC has 10 or sometimes 11 sessions running in parallel. So there are definitely some very fascinating people that I did not get to meet. But hopefully this gives you a little taste of what was going on. Also, big thanks to IEEE Control System Society for their grant that enabled me to buy some very good microphones, without which this episode would not have worked at all. So get ready to hear about a load of recent advances in control theory and applications, including congestion control, sparsity, neural networks, bio-inspired iterative learning control, reinforcement learning, the importance of open source practices in control, and so much more as you come on this audio journey with me to the European Control Conference. Okay, so I have just arrived at Thessaloniki Concert Hall, which is where the conference is taking place. It is a very nice building. There's one half that's nice red brick and the other half is kind of newly built glass. Very pretty. It's right in front of the sea. So I'm currently outside trying to get up the courage to go inside and talk to people, which is a little bit scary. Okay, so yeah, what's your name? Where are you from?
So hi, I'm Avinash Agasti. I'm a PhD student from IIT Madras, India. If I were to summarize my research topic in a few lines, it would be my work primarily involves trying to devise optimal strategies in situations similar to military dogfights. Essentially, whenever there are two parties engaged in some sort of a conflict, and in this situation, we want to find out an equilibrium point that forms a notion of optimality for the parties.
Okay, so could you introduce yourself, what your research is about, that kind of thing?
I'm Guido Carnevale. I'm working in the University of Bologna, and I mainly work on distributed optimization and optimal control. Let's say from a system theory perspective, I'm trying to design and analyze algorithms using tools from system theory.
Could you give like a quick overview of the talk that you gave this morning?
Okay, yes. So I try to see algorithms in these scenarios, distributed algorithms, feedback optimization, optimal control, as dynamical system, so that I can use all tools, Lassalle's invariance principle, Lyapunov, but also more advanced one like timescale separation and averaging theory, to design and analyze this algorithm using these tools as dynamical system.
Okay, so it is currently lunchtime of the first day. The weather is extremely nice outside, and conference is very fun. I have talked to many people. Sometimes I go up to them and they're a little bit startled. I need to not startle people with my enthusiasm, but it's been very fun. So this morning I went to a workshop on essentially kind of like algorithmic control. So using systems theory to analyze algorithms and like how we can use control to analyze algorithms and algorithmic convergence and stuff like that. I'm probably not like explaining it very well, but there were some really good talks. There's one person in particular that I really want to talk to. Okay, so this is post-conference Lucy, butting in to say that the researcher I wanted to talk to was Luca Ferrieri, and tragically I didn't manage to get an interview with him during the conference, but the essence of his talk was that he was using neural networks to evolve algorithms and enhance their performance. And it was a really great talk. If that sounds like something you would be interested in, I believe all of the workshop and plenary talks from ECC are going to be put online at some point. So when that happens, I will include links in the description and you can go watch Luca do his talk because it was great. So, whilst I was attending the workshop on systems theory of optimization, learning and control algorithms, my friend Dan was attending the session on leveraging sparsity in control. So I also ended up interviewing a bunch of interesting people who gave talks in that workshop.
My name is René Vidal. I'm a professor at the University of Pennsylvania in electrical and systems engineering and radiology. What do? I work in many problems, and some of them in machine learning, computer vision, AI in general, but I also work in dynamical systems and controls.
Could you give a very quick summary of the talk you gave earlier? Dan said that it was very good.
So for a long time, we've been worried about this question of looking at dynamical systems where the inputs to the systems are sparse. What that means is that, for example, in motor control, the control of human movements, you can have many spiking neurons all over the place, but for a particular movement that a human executes, very few neurons are active at a given time. So for those kind of problems, what this talk was fairly theoretical. We were trying to simply understand that if you give me the output of the system, observations of those movements, whether I can decode or find the initial condition that produced that, as well as the sparse sequence of inputs.
I'm Lisa Lee. I'm from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, USA. And so I do some distributed control, some optimal control, and also I use control theory to make neuroscience models, primarily with sensory motor control.
What was your talk on this morning?
I was talking about distributed control with sparse local communications. So basically, if you have a huge grid, instead of having one giant controller, you'll have one little controller for each node on the grid. And then the sparsity is in, we don't want all of them to communicate to all of them. That would be a lot. Just communicate to kind of neighbors, right? And I was talking about model predictive control with these constraints and how the performance is actually pretty good compared to the global case.
So I'm Victor Magron. I'm a young researcher at CNRS. And I'm mainly interested in several aspects of polynomial optimization. So how to model things with it, how to efficiently use it, and how to certify the results obtained by numerical solvers. I gave a talk at the pre-workshop that was about leveraging sparsity in control. So I'm mainly interested in the exploitation of the structure of the optimization problem. So in general, you will not be able to solve these kind of problems because they are NP-hard. But for many interesting instances, you can basically look at the problem in the eyes and exploit the structure. So either the sparsity of the data or sometimes the symmetry, which is even better if you can detect it, and also the algebraic structure. So for instance, if you have specific equations that you know how to analyze, and that have a finite number of solutions, then you can really exploit this to speed up the optimization process.
So I spent the afternoon of the first day sneaking into various different workshops to see what else was going on. This was a combination of cyber-physical systems and safe control, and here are some of the interesting people that I met.
Could you introduce yourself and a bit about what your research is about?
Yes, I'm Giacomo Como. I'm a professor at Politecnico di Torino in Italy. And I do research within network systems, applications to economic networks and infrastructure networks mainly.
Could you give kind of a very brief overview of the talk that you gave earlier that I really enjoyed?
Well, I gave a talk about transportation systems and how incentive mechanisms could be designed in order to improve efficiency in a resilient way. And I focus on two aspects, mainly dynamic pricing. So how could you design pricing of the single links that change dynamically based on the congestion level on those links? And the second part was on information design. That's a more new topic where what you try to design is the sort of messages that are given to the users of the system in order to influence their behavior towards a desirable social goal.
So, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your research about? First question.
Yeah, I come from Italy, but I work as an associate professor at the University of Iowa in the United States. My research is more focused on controls, so enabling autonomous agents to be safe in the environment around humans and to move in a way that they don't hurt and they efficiently reach their purpose.
So could you give a brief overview of the talk you've just given, which is really interesting and engaging?
Yeah, the talk was focused on multi-agent systems, which means swarms, several autonomous vehicles, which may be ground vehicles like cars or underwater vehicles, submarines, and even drones. Try to cooperate with each other, reach overall objectives together, and maintain safety. In the talk, I went over how they should generate motion so that a priori they know they're going to be safe, which leads to several software issues which right now cannot entirely be addressed with the computer that we have. So I presented about some numerical solvers that can relax the problem and perhaps be more efficient and feasible for online application. And then I talked about coordination, which means assuming that you plan trajectories and drones are theoretically going to be safe, how will they react if something adversarial, unforeseen happens?
I'm Mariam Kamgarpur. I'm a professor at EPFL now, and I work on control, optimization, and learning. And so basically, decision-making algorithms for dynamical systems, for making systems do what we like them to do.
Could you give an overview of the talk that you just gave upstairs?
Sure. So this talk was about incorporating safety in reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning, it solves a stochastic control problem, which is kind of my background, but in a model-free way. And it's been really powerful, and it's being advocated for robotics, for autonomous cars. But this method doesn't really have guarantees. There are some works that start to look at it theoretically, but there's still a gap between theory and practice. And we try to also contribute to this formal guarantees for RL by incorporating safety constraints. So if our trajectory, our system has to be in a safe set, for example, our car has to avoid collision, how can we address that in a reinforcement learning way?
So what I loved about this talk in particular is that as well as being super interesting, you could really tell that Mariam was just so excited and enthusiastic about her research. Like, she was just grinning for the entire presentation, and I was so here for it. It was great. Also, throughout the breaks in the first day, I went around asking people what they were most looking forward to at ECC. So here are just kind of a snippet of some of the responses that I got.
Okay, so it's great to be at a conference this large, assembling people from so many countries with so many different tastes in research and backgrounds, and to see what everybody's doing. ECC is a conference of relatively newer date, starting a couple of decades back. It has now grown to a size comparable to the American Control Conference that existed since the early 70s, and I'm delighted to see people from different countries collaborating and running this conference so seamlessly, and the work being so innovative and the students being so talented.
Well, I'm really excited to see many of my friends, many of my collaborators and friends, to catch up with them, and also to learn about all the new cool control problems that everyone's working on here.
So my main goal here in the conference is to meet people, really, and meet people, discuss some perhaps new ideas that may come up for new research.
So it is currently the end of day one of ECC. I think it has been a success. There's been lots of interesting talks. So I went into one on cyber-physical systems, very interesting talk about traffic and congestion control. And then after that, I kind of ran across to the safe control one, which I'm really glad I did because the speaker was really interesting. Anyway, I'm a little bit tired. I need to go and get some food. But yes, I'm very happy because I got to talk to all except one of the people that I wanted to interview. Also I'm finding out this involves kind of a lot of just like awkward loitering, but I guess that's like basically what networking is, especially as a PhD student who no one knows yet.
so it is the coffee break of the second day of ECC. So we had the reception this morning, which I was slightly late for because I got distracted by taking photos of the pigeons on the walkover. But that was cool. I got to see the head of lots of various big organisations like IFAC and the European Control Association. And then there was a talk by Miroslav Kristic, who you might have heard on In Control, and it was very technical, but in a really understandable and visual way. It was great. I really, really want to get an interview from him. So hopefully that's another goal on the ECC list.
Hi, so I'm Miroslav Kristic from University of California, San Diego. I've been active in research since 1991, so nearly 35 years. I started out in adaptive and nonlinear control, then moved on to control partial differential equations and delays, and I work also on something called extremum seeking.
Could you give an overview of the talk that you just gave? I found it really, really interesting and understandable.
So this talk was dedicated to the subject of robust adaptive control, and specifically to a methodology that overcomes a challenge that has existed for nearly 45 years in terms of being able to achieve regulation to an arbitrarily close proximity of the desired equilibrium, which was impossible with the previous methods. At a career stage that I am at, with many decades of work, the threshold of excitement is pretty high. So you take something in the range of long-standing open problems to excite me, but then it excites me a lot to have the opportunity to say something on that subject. This research came up in the form of a sort of a bet between Jason and me. Maybe 6-7 years ago, we were teaching a course in Belgrade through the European graduate school, and as we were walking back to our apartment from the university, he said he would like to work on adaptive control in the presence of large disturbances. Everything that I knew about that problem indicated that that's an impossible problem, but that it takes a lot of effort to grasp its impossibility through failures of any attempt that one undertakes. So we view the problem differently, me through negative experiences and him through some hope and ideas how to do something that made sense to him, and he won the bet and managed to find a solution that wasn't even formulated until that time, because it was not even clear what the objective that might be achievable is. So I dedicated my talk to illuminating as simply as I can the problem, its solution, and the contributions in the control design and in the analysis for this problem.
I am Iason Karafilis. I am professor at the National Technical University of Athens at the Department of Mathematics. And I'm working on mathematical control theory. I'm working a lot on stability theory and on the solution of feedback stabilization problems. And what else can I say to you?
I mean, do you want to give an overview of your contribution to Miroslav's talk?
My contribution to Miroslav's talk is we're working together. He exaggerated my contribution. Really, he did that. Because he is always so good to me. And we work together for many years now, so we have learned each other's attitudes, and manners. So I know his manners, I know his attitude, and I want to believe that we are also very good friends.
So after the first plenary, I attended a session on adaptive control. There are a few talks that I really enjoyed. So one of these was by Daniel Nikovsky and was on state representation learning for visual servo control. So this was a really clear and well-given talk looking at how to build visual motor control policies. So using an image of the surroundings to learn a compact state space that can then be used for control. It was very cool. There was another presentation I really liked on adaptive observers, and I managed to track down the speaker later on in the conference for a little mini interview.
So my name is Rosane Shirabira, and I'm a mathematician, a senior researcher at INRIA, which is the French National Institute for Research in Digital Sciences and Technology. I used to work with the Lie groups and Lie algebras for many years, but then I moved to Lille, where I fell in love with the control theory because it was so beautiful, and it was like a big change for me. Like learning that you actually mathematics you can apply to to real things, let's say, to practical things. So my favorite thing in control theory is to estimate. I like estimating states and parameters of dynamical systems. I love doing interdisciplinary projects. I did many with biologists and like startups and stuff and business. And I have a big project now that's just started. Like I want to apply whatever I learned in lead theory and control theory, especially for designing observers and applications in robotics. And what I presented yesterday in my talk was part of another project where the goal is to apply control theory methods to epidemiological systems. This part is important in the sense that what I present is this very nice general non-linear system that is Persitsky systems, and then we worked about this a lot now, and I think there are many things to do yet.
On lunchtime of the second day, there were 2 lunch sessions running in parallel. So one of these was on European Research Council funding. The other one was the NextCom Early Career Lunch event. Now, NextCom is kind of a subcommittee within IEEE Control Systems Society aimed at supporting students, early careers researchers, and young professionals. And this lunch featured a panel session on open source practices in control research. Now, I'm on the NextCom committee. I have the very minor role of Outreach and Broadening Participation Committee member. But because I was going to ECC, I volunteered to help out with this event and actually ended up hosting the panel session. So there were a lot of really interesting points made, and I asked each of the panel members afterwards to give a little mini summary of their thoughts in the area.
Hi, my name is Michelle Chong. I'm an assistant professor at Eindhoven University of Technology. I think that it's very important to have open source practices because, the field of, especially control community, traditionally, let's just say providing code for algorithms has not been a widespread practice. I think that's incredibly important because then results are easily reproducible and it just increases the credibility of the impact we have to our society and industry.
My name is Tim Paulwasser. I am a full professor for control systems at Hamburg University of Technology. I would say transparency is key in scientific communication, and transparency has different dimensions. It has the dimension of the numerical examples, which relates to open source codes, but I'd also like to link it to what I'd like to call open thought. I'd very much love if sometimes in a lot of the papers I read in editorial boards, as a reviewer also, if sometimes they would explain more what they do instead of throwing all the equations at me. And I think both things have to go hand in hand. And in terms of the numerical side, the open source codes, I think there is a prospect of developing good, well-documented, challenging benchmark examples for different fields of control. And if you do this well, I'm convinced they can live on for decades, but they should be more complicated than the infamous double integrator, which has been the benchmark in robust MPC for decades, or the inverted pendulum in a lot of lectures. They should have to be more challenging, and it would be nice if they would relate to real applications.
So I'm Victor Magron. I'm a young researcher at CNRS. So it might be counterintuitive, but some of our industrial partners are seem to be even more interested by open source practice than us in academia, because they basically want to show the results of their dispatch of the electrical network. And so that's one of the reasons. Another reason, of course, is the fact that it's easier to reproduce, that you might be able to understand a bit better what's inside the code. So now we have some optimization journals that have specific referees for the software part. So to get this reproducibility stamp, then it's of course mandatory to have the code released in open source.
So in the afternoon, I did a little bit of jumping between sessions. There was one talk in particular that I loved, and it was titled Sufficient Conditions for Detectability of Approximately Discretized Nonlinear Systems. And it was pretty theoretical, but the presentation gave a load of the intuition behind the equations, which was very satisfying.
So, my name is Seth Syria. I'm currently a postdoc at the Leibniz University of Hanover. Basically, the research that I presented here at ECC was with regards to detectability of discretized models of continuous time systems. Right. So basically, the idea is typically when you design an observer for a system, right, you want to implement it on a computer. But to use a computer, you need to implement things digitally, and so continuous time observers aren't really applicable. One way that people address this is they discretize a model of the continuous time system, and then they essentially design an observer for the discretized model and then apply it on the continuous time model. There are results that currently guarantee the stability of the observer if the designed observer is stable on the discretized model, and then they can show that it's stable on the continuous time one. But what my research then asks the natural question that precedes this, which is it possible to design a stable observer on the discretized model in the first place? And essentially what my work shows is that under some regularity conditions and by sampling sufficiently fast, we affirmatively say that, you can do this.
I'm Lorenzo Zino from Politecnico di Torino in Italy, and I've been working with, in general, dynamics on networks, in particular epidemic models since my PhD, and I started working with classical epidemic models, where typically there are individuals who interact with other individuals, and the disease can spread through interactions, like airborne diseases or sexually transmitted diseases. Then recently I started getting interested in vector-borne diseases. The main limitations is that the classical mathematical models, so those that I studied from the PhD on, are typically focused on diseases that are spread individuals to individuals, so do not consider the presence of vectors, while models for vector-borne diseases typically are highly complicated because they have been developed mostly to do simulations to predict or forecast the spread of a disease, which is great, but then cannot be used, for instance, to design control policies because they cannot be studied analytically. So with a master student last year, we have started proposing a mathematical model that is simple enough that can be treated analytically, but that is able to capture the important features of vector-borne diseases. So we were able to cast the model as a simple set of nonlinear ODEs for which it's possible to characterize the emergent behavior, characterize conditions for stability of the disease-free equilibrium, and characterize the endemic equilibrium. And then, building on that, we were able to design an optimal control problem in order to introduce some control actions consisting, for instance, in incentivizing the use of protections or using, for instance, insecticides to reduce the population of vectors, and understand how to design a control policies by using one, the other, or combining these two policies in an optimal way.
Okay, so I've just finished kind of listening to a session on nonlinear systems, and it was really good. There were loads of really good presentations. One of the people I got an interview from, another person, I really wanted to talk to him, but he was like kind of shy, understandably didn't want his voice online, but his research was about basically using Koopman operators to approximate functions and looking at the error bounds related to that. And essentially the aim was trying to kind of approximate the region of stability of nonlinear functions using Koopman operators. I'll try and find his paper and link it, because that was really cool. And there was also another interesting talk that I think was going to be really relevant to my research specifically on basically like finite time stability. The details of it were kind of complicated, but I think that's going to be really useful for my work. And now I need to get food and hopefully go to a session on uses of data-driven practices in industry, which would be cool, but I need to find out where it is. Okay, so it is currently just after lunchtime on day 3 of ECC. So I've just come out of the talk on data-driven techniques in industry. There was a very interesting speaker. So the last speaker who I wanted to get an interview with, she basically said that the company needed to make sure they were okay with anything she said. So we might get a long interview in future, but the talk was on uses of control in mining. So it turns out mining actually very interesting, and I think key points of the talk were that in order to achieve net zero, we're going to need a lot of different metals, so more copper than has ever been extracted. So mining is actually really important in contributing to low carbon economy, but obviously it also produces a lot of emissions as well. So she was from ABB, which is kind of an electrical company, I believe, and they were basically looking at like the complicated control systems in mining, and the fact that, for example, if you're using an MPC controller, like any model-based controller, is going to be difficult because the situations in the mine are going to change, like as you take stuff out of the mine, or if you kind of change the thing that you're extracting for that mine, things are going to change. So that was really great. Also, I wanted to mention the plenary lecture this morning because, again, I wanted to get an interview, but the speaker was again from ABB, so I think we're going to have the same issue. But his talk was on basically control of high voltage networks, and he was just really excited about control of high voltage networks and how that's crucial to climate. His talk is going to be online. I will try and link to it. I'm currently trying to work out whether it's worth going into half an hour of one of the plenary lectures that's happening currently. We'll see. So after the plenary lecture, I again did a little bit of hopping between sessions, going between different talks, and I ended up in a session on stochastic filtering. So my favourite talk in this session was by a researcher called Massimiliano D'Angelo, who is an associate professor at Università Mercatorum, and his paper and presentation was on using extended Kalman filter informed neural networks for system identification. So I got to talk to him afterwards. I didn't realise at the time how much background noise there was in the recording, so apologies for that. But his work is extremely interesting, so I wanted to include it in here anyway.
In my joint work presented at the European Control Conference 2025, together with my colleagues from the National Research Council of Italy, we addressed the problem of system identification. To tackle this challenge, we combine our expertise in stochastic state estimation with a new class of neural networks known as physics-informed neural network. Physics-informed neural network incorporates known physical laws, typically expressed as differential equations, directly into the training process. This allows the model to respect known physics, improve generalization with less data, and produce more physically consistent predictions, especially in regimes where data is sparse. In order to adopt the physics-informed neural network framework, we reformulate the problem by using the corresponding state estimator as a new dynamical system to eliminate the explicit effects of noise. This allows us to incorporate into the physics-informed neural network a dynamics that accounts for the noise present in the system without explicitly depending on it.
Okay, so I am currently at the kind of conference dinner. I actually really enjoyed the conference dinner. I was super duper tired after a long day of conference. I wasn't really feeling it. But actually, it was really nice. I met some very, very lovely people, had a bit of a chat. I decided I wasn't going to record anything because, like, everyone's chilling and they don't want me sticking a microphone in their face. But I'm hoping that tomorrow I'll be able to get a lot more mini interviews and kind of thoughts on how people found the conference. So I did end up going to the session on neural networks, and actually, I'm so glad that I did because it was really interesting. Again, I kind of tried to talk to the speaker, but he went off very quickly. If you're interested, you can watch the plenary lecture on the ECC website, and I'll try and link it after the conference. Basically, what he was doing is, instead of just having a static neural network where you adapt the weights, he was looking at kind of increasing and decreasing the functions and adapting the kind of functions that you were using, increasing the number of neurons in the network or decreasing them to make sure that you have the number of neurons that you need to be able to represent your function, but not mass is more. The other thing was that he was using not just one type of activation functions or one type of neuron, because the brain doesn't just use one type of neuron, or kind of it has different regions that do different things. So he had different types of activation functions and online learning and continual adaptation of the number of neurons and what they were doing. Overall, good day. And also very good food at the meal. Very, very nice Greek food. That was very, very nice couscous. I enjoyed that a lot. So yes, we will see what tomorrow brings. Currently walking back from the conference dinner, so they dropped us off in the city centre. So there was a very, very lovely walk back to my hotel along the seafront, and there was a lot going on. There were a lot of people out mingling. Also found a pretty amazing Greek rock concert outdoors. It was really good music. It was a bob.
Μέσα σου ο πιο άσχημος δαρμός. Ένα-δύο, πιο στιγμές να ζήσω ζωντανός. Είναι αρκετές, θα σβήσει ο λίπος. Οι πληγές μου θα κλείσουν εντελώς. Όσοι μοιάζει το προσβιώσω, με τα πόδια πάνω φωτά στο κενό.
On the final day, the plenary lecture was given by the winner of the 2025 European Control Award, which this year was won by Tim Faulwasser, who you might remember we heard earlier because he very kindly agreed to be on the NextCon panel session about open source practices in control. So this was an amazing talk. I was so happy that Tim agreed to give an overview for me afterwards for the podcast, but you should definitely all go watch it once it becomes available because I thoroughly enjoyed it.
My name is Tim Faulwasser. I am a full professor for control systems at Hamburg University of Technology, and I look at optimization-based control for cyber-physical systems and stochastic systems in a variety of applications which go from mechanics to energy to process control.
Could you give kind of a short overview of the amazing talk that you just gave?
Oh gosh, that is hard to do. Well, I tried to take the audience into a journey along a turnpike. On the turnpike, I have been moving at a rather rapid pace in the last years in my research, connecting dissipativity notions of Jan Willems with optimal control and how a phenomenon which is called the turnpike property unfolds in there. And the interesting thing which always attracts me about the turnpike is you can trace it back to John von Neumann and really big names and science who have observed it. And what we did is we, in a line of research, not only me, also others have been working on it, we saw how it is very closely related to dissipativity and how this all plays together, and that there is a richness of results in there. You can have the deterministic problems, discrete time, stochastic PDEs. It always appears, and once you discover the structure, it always becomes sometimes, I don't want to say boring, but it becomes like, oh yeah, we can do this again also for this. Oh yeah, there it means this. We can do this there. Oh, there it means this. And that was really a very interesting journey. And then the second line of thinking in this talk was how you can use this dissipativity-based analysis results for dissipativity-informed design. And I talked about two things, MPC and more recent work on how dissipativity informs the design of neural network training, and where we can give depth bounds and try to bring some new ideas to the machine learning community.
In the morning of the final day, I attended a session on control of mobility and traffic systems, which ever since I saw a talk by Antonella Ferrara at a conference last year, I have been fascinated by. There are a few really cool talks, but my favourite one was on lane-free traffic and coordinating autonomous vehicles in these sorts of environments. And I don't know why, but the concept of having like main roads without lanes and allowing cars to weave in between each other and they don't crash is so cool.
Right, go ahead. Hi, I am Nilupar Dabestani, a PhD candidate at Technical University of Crete. My recent work is focused on a distributed model predictive control for automated vehicles, platoons and flocks in lane-free traffic. So I started this journey by joint vehicle path planning for a group of connected and automated vehicles in lane-free traffic. Then I used that joint path planning approach in order to create and operate a one-dimensional snake-like platoon of vehicles. And then I moved on to forming and maintaining a two-dimensional vehicle flock, again by the means of my joint path planning approach. And at that point, we decided to make a transition from the open-loop optimal control problem for one group of vehicles to a distributed model predictive control framework for various CAV entities. Now we were no longer focused on one group of vehicles. In fact, our CAV entities could range from individual vehicles to vehicle platoons and vehicle flocks.
My name is Antonella Ferrara. I'm from Italy. I'm a full professor at the moment at the University of Pavia in Italy. I work in a, let's say, area of nonlinear control, which is called variable structure and sliding mode control. This is my major theoretical research field. Then I also do application. I'm quite interested in application in the sense that I feel to be an engineer. So my soul is that of an engineer. So I like to see the theory that I developed, the theory that also other people developed and that maybe I decide to use or to expand and develop further. I like to see that theory applied. Honestly, it gave me a lot of satisfaction. I prefer to work on vehicle networks or traffic control. And so that was an area which I liked a lot and I still like. And I also work a bit in power systems because traditionally my course I teach nonlinear control, process control and robot control. And so I work even on power system. I like power systems. They are quite interesting and there are nice aspects to consider and they are quite challenging for the application of control and also observation.
You organised a kind of really interesting lunch session on women in control. So I don't know if you have any kind of like insights into that, the importance of sessions such as those.
Well, I've always been rather, let's say, active in trying to promote women, to inspire women, especially, I'm thinking of the junior fellows in our community. I must say that I think it's important because, you were present during the section, and in that lunch section we were actually, let's say, trying to, inspire the new generation in control. I must say that I was young many years ago, but let's say when I was young, I also experienced the same situation that our speakers today mentioned, the fact of being one in a, let's say, group of 3 or 4 female students in a class of 300 or 400 male students. I never felt discriminated, honestly, in my life. Of course, I had a bit to struggle sometimes when I had my daughters who were very, very young, very small. I had the perception that sometimes my male colleagues, they didn't understand my difficulties. So it was not easy sometimes to ask them to change a bit their normal schedule of activities in order to take into account my needs or my difficulties. And I never dared to ask that. That's the point. It is difficult for a woman to ask. But that was a bit difficult phase of my life. I hope that for the young generation, things are getting better and better. I have this impression. I must say that in general, the male colleagues are supportive. They do their best. I mean, I don't see anyone really guilty for having the wrong attitude. I think that we need to improve. We need to improve, altogether, not individually, but let's say as a community. Yeah. This is my feeling, at least.
Hello, I'm Marinella Lemonica. I'm an assistant professor in civil and environmental engineering at UC Berkeley, and my work is at the intersection between math, control, and transportation.
So your talk on the lunch session earlier, part of it was on the importance of role models. So could you kind of give your views on that?
Yes, I think role models are fundamental. I had a lot of role models during my years as an early career scientist and also as an early career researcher. And I think they are the main reason why we end up doing what we do, because I think leading by example is the most important thing that one can do. In particular, I think when you work with wonderful collaborators, wonderful mentors, kind of becomes a feedback loop in a way. You kind of learn from them, and then you hope that in the future you're able to give back what you've learned, and you improve yourself and improve your way of doing things based on what you see and based on what you learn from these people, and then give this back to the students and to the postdocs, and being able to show them that there's a path forward regardless of where the starting point is.
Okay, so there are 2 things that I wanted to mention about Maria Lara's talk that meant that I was sitting in the room being like, I absolutely have to go speak to this woman. So firstly, what she didn't mention previously is that as part of her work on automated vehicles, she was part of a team that actually implements this in practice. So she got 100 cars and actually got them to drive around autonomously in a real life ecosystem. Secondly, the second half of her talk was talking about kind of mentorship, and something she said that I wrote down was a piece of advice that you should try and find people willing to answer your questions and bring you on their shoulders, which personally I think is excellent advice and makes me eternally grateful to my 2 wonderful PhD supervisors for putting up with me and my many, many questions.
So it is currently kind of mid-afternoon of the last day of the conference. I'm very tired, but it has been a good day. There's been a lot of interesting people. The plenary lecture this morning was fascinating. I've kind of been hopping between sessions since then. There was a really interesting session. It was very technical in the content, but the overarching idea was to use quantum computers to solve nonlinear MPC problems. And so the talk was basically about how to formulate standard MPC problems
into it's like a special formulation that could be solved on quantum computers. But I mean, it was just like quantum stuff is very cool.
So the final session on the final day was on iterative learning control. Everyone by then was very tired, but again, there were some really great talks. And in particular, if you remember Dan right from the start of this episode, who recommended that I go and talk to the researchers from the sparsity workshop, he gave his talk in this session and it was fantastic. Not that I am at all biased, but that's beside the point because Dan is an excellent speaker.
My name's Daniel Hobson. I work in biologically inspired iterative learning control. So I know your listeners have heard quite a lot about iterative learning control from several of the previous podcast episodes. I'll encourage them to go back to those. But the thing that I do that's a bit different is biologically inspired. So half of my work is looking at the sort of neuroscience background and asking questions like, how can humans and animals move as accurately and efficiently as they really do? And the key observation, really, is that the structure of the central nervous system, we're talking the spinal cord here, is modular, like it's broken down into small parts. And this turns out to be a really important property. Essentially turns a big problem into lots of small problems. And so my work is basically using those sort of same properties for artificial systems. We build controllers that are broken down into small parts and then use a method for learning how much of each of those small parts do you need to successfully reconstruct the true plant dynamics.
What's been your favourite part of ECC?
The favorite part was the Subway Plenary by Stefano Stramigioli. Great talk, very different from your usual lecture. It was inspired by so many great scientists in the past. It basically proved that he himself is one of the greatest scientists of the present.
There was several really good talks. I have to say, I did really enjoy going on a tour of the city that the ECC organised. But in terms of technical stuff, there was a semi-plenary talk about event-based control. So this is don't regularly apply control, but do it only at specific times. And I thought that was a really interesting talk, so I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, the best part was like meeting friends and collaborators. So these conferences are really nice venue to meet them and then exchange ideas. So,
I really enjoyed the session on stochastic systems. I felt like all the talks were kind of on similar topics, but different point of view, and there was kind of an engaging discussion among the presenters and the audience. So I felt it very natural, and I actually learned something about it, so it was great.
My favorite part of ECC has been meeting up with my colleagues and finding out what all the cool control problems they've been working on, and to catch up with new friends, old friends, and making new friends.
I liked some of the plenaries and semi-plenaries, particularly those which were very related to my subject area, because there's a wide variety of stuff that control people do.
Yeah.
And then I also like the social program, so particularly the banquet which we had yesterday, so that was really nice.
So I don't have a favorite moment, because many moments in ECC are very cool for me, and I really enjoy this.
For the first talk on modeling this network of humans, and then with avatars, how do you coordinate human agents with avatars doing certain motions, like with applications in rehabilitation. So that was amazing.
Professor Mariam's talk on safety guarantees on beach avoid situations, that's particularly what I've been looking at for the last few months, in fact. So that was really interesting to me.
So first of all, the location is amazing. To have a sea view all the time is really nice. And many technical sessions were very applicable to my research area.
So I am just walking away from final day of ECC. It's actually been amazing. I've met so many cool, interesting people. I guess I was kind of expecting this. A lot of new areas of control I'd never considered. Kind of looking at areas of control that I thought I knew quite well in different ways. Yeah, it's been great. Highlight was definitely interviewing Miroslav Kristic, and yeah, it's been good.
So that is all from ECC. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. It was something of an experiment to make, so I am curious to hear what you think. I am hoping to go to CDC, so the Conference on Decision and Control, in December, depending on if my paper gets accepted. So if you enjoyed it, I might do a similar thing there. Alternatively, if you thought it was terrible, I will stick to my usual format and not do it again. Big thanks to everyone I met at ECC who put up with me cornering them for various interviews. I didn't manage to include all of the footage that I collected, so if I talked to you and your interview wasn't included, rest assured, I still thought your work was very interesting. I just wanted to keep this episode to a somewhat manageable length. So next month's episode is going to be from a researcher who I met at ECC, and we sat down for a full hour-length chat about her work on autonomous driving. That should be released on the 1st of August, but until then, I hope you have a really great month.